I was born in Jakarta, Indonesia in 1951. Things was the war in Vietnam. In those days, boys who turned 18 were eligible for the draft. They got an invitation to join the draft, and at that time, given a lottery number, you might be eligible for the draft during that 1 year of eligibility or escape the draft. I was 17 years old in 1969, but I was lucky enough that my draft lottery number was high, and I wasn't drafted, and so I went on to college. I knew several people who served in the military. They were my co-workers, for one, and many of my co-workers were either drafted or joined the military. Some of my friends as adults were in Vietnam, and they suffered physically. Some even contracted hepatitis. My father was a prisoner of war during World War II, where he was beaten and caged for 3 years. Well, I mean, when he was prisoner of war, I was not around yet, but the Vietnam War was very scary. I followed the news every day. That's all we saw on TV every day. You know, the news led off with the war in Vietnam. They were keeping track of how many deaths were recorded every day. And it seems to me like the war was really determined by how many deaths each side experienced. And most often the United States had fewer deaths than the Vietnamese. And that supposedly means that we were winning the war. But, you know, in 1969, 1970, Nixon became president, and he started to withdraw troops from Vietnam, and in a way that you know, made me happy, because it meant that maybe I was not going to be drafted. Well, I mean, war. I was, you know, raised around the idea of war and how unjust it was, and it certainly affects me today, and it also affects, you know, how I interpret history and how I deliver history to my students. I think my students can testify to the fact that I have a very cynical attitude about a lot of things regarding politics and things that are taught in the textbook. And I want them to at least learn from me that everything is worth questioning, and that not to take everything or anything at face value. Be aware of propaganda, how advertisement and the news media try to affect or influence your decisions to buy things or to believe things. I think all of that had to do with, you know, being raised in the 1960s, where people were always questioning things, and I took that seriously.